Welcome, everybody, to the January 2023 Now Reading. We are recording this, so don't say anything you don't want on YouTube. So tonight's reading, our theme is winter. So many things. Snow, cold, hot fires, hot chocolate, dormant trees, pregnant animals. Winter is a time of death and growth. And we don't normally think of it that way. You know, we look at winter and everything's dead and dull and cold and miserable and sad. And yet, out of winter, we have birds, little animals, bunnies, fawns, all these little things. We also have northern lights, which I really want to see, and cold. Our readers tonight are Marianne Jones, Thomas Wayne King, and Mary Gastmeier. Our first reading is from Marianne Jones. Marianne is a poet, playwright, and novelist who was born and raised in Thunder Bay, a city which she considers Canada's best-kept secret. She has been writing since the age of 11. 3 of her poems can be found engraved on stone benches at Marina Park, and her novel, Maud and Me, won the Best Fiction Award in 2022 from the Word Guild. She is currently working on a play about the life of L.M. Montgomery. In previous incarnations, she has been a stay-at-home mom, an elementary school teacher, a children's choir director, and a sometimes actor and director. She and her husband, Reg, love music, theater, dancing, family, and their church. They are grateful to live in a place so rich, both in nature, beauty, and the arts. Marianne?
Thank you. I just want to say hi to James and hi to Susan. Thank you both for showing up tonight and helping flesh out our numbers a little. So, yeah. Anyway, so Maud and Me, for those that don't know, it's a crazy idea that came to me over 20 years ago. Sort of a vision of a minister's wife living in Marathon during the 1980s, looking up one day from her garden and seeing Ella Montgomery standing there, which of course is impossible, since Ella Montgomery died in the 1940s. So, but the idea was so strong and compelling that I continued with it and came out with this novel. So where I'm reading here is chapter 15. Whom the gods wish to destroy, they make into ministers' wives, Maud said, smoothing the skirt of her gray silk dress. We were sitting on a rocky promontory overlooking Lake Superior. I had come to do some sketching. The view from that perspective was dramatic, a sheer drop hundreds of feet to the water. We admired the potentillas growing from cracks in the rocks. Even on a pleasant day like this one, the waves were constant, wrinkling in the breeze and sending a white spray against the rocks. I was amazed that the yellow flowering shrub could appear and thrive in such a harsh environment. You don't suffer fools gladly, she commented. Neither did I, inwardly. But fools must be suffered, gladly or not. It's necessary for your husband's sake. What about my sake? Her smile was rueful. Some questions are better left unasked. Maybe you didn't have the courage to ask them. Instead of taking offense, she reached for a blade of foxtail and broke it off. Stroking its softness, she said, "I dare say I didn't. If you start asking yourself too many questions, you become forced to act or to despair. I didn't care much for either option." Maud was in a mood for reminiscing. Leaksdale was such a small place, a village, really. Whoever said small places are wonderful because everyone knows everyone else should be strung up. A little anonymity would have been refreshing. There, people were consumed with curiosity to know what went on in the manse. They counted the mats we hung out on the backyard fence and knew when our washing went on the line, and they told their neighbors about it. I looked at her. Why? They were mostly elderly people, old in mind as well as body. There was little going on in their lives, and less in their heads. I apologize. I have to get some water.
No problem.
There was little going on in their lives, and less in their heads. I watched the waves breaking against the rocks, sending up white droplets. How did you stand it? Some days I very nearly didn't. Winters were the worst. I had to go out in the evenings for meetings and visiting and to direct the Christmas pageants when I was exhausted and run down and just wanted to stay in. And there was none of the beauty of nature to console me. That's when loneliness closed in on me. She stared off at the expanse of lake. To be so pressed upon by people and their demands, and yet to have no one to really talk to, that was heavy to bear. Ewan was little comfort. He had little appreciation for what it cost me to support him in his work, and he resented those times when I enjoyed a little attention and success in my writing. "You did get a lot of both," I commented. "You met Nellie McClung and Mrs. Pankhurst and Earl Grey. Not bad for a minister's wife from a farming community." She smiled with pardonable satisfaction. "I did indeed. Of course, none of those dignitaries witnessed me mucking out the stable at home when Ewan was ill. It would have cured them of any illusions they had about the glamour of a famous author's life." "Still," I remarked, "it must have been fun to be famous." "Well, yes, the money was useful, especially during the Depression years. And I won't deny that my vanity enjoyed the fame and fuss a wee bit. But all in all, I was less impressed by it than many of the people in our circles. And it was of little use to me that I had met the Governor General and shaken his hand when my daily tasks kept me worn out from morning till night." "What were they like, Nellie McClung and the others?" Nellie McClung was very handsomely dressed and charming. She entertained us with stories and witticisms that weren't original, but were well received all the same. Mrs. Pankhurst was a surprise to me. She had a gentle, unassuming demeanor, like some tired elder's wife, not at all like the firebrand I had read so much about. I absolutely could not imagine her smashing windows or enduring abuse in prison. "Oh, that's very nice. You've captured those flowers perfectly. Fragile looking, but blooming bravely against a hostile environment." Lady Byng, no. She wasn't good looking, but she was stately and intelligent, and an author herself, an admirable person. I remember that when I was invited to meet Lord Grey, I did not welcome the honor at all. "Really? Why not?" I looked sharply at her, wondering if she wasn't being disingenuous. "Because of all the bother when I was already worn out after a busy summer. I had to rush about having a dress made, arranging for a ride, canceling engagements. In the end, it turned out well, even though it was nerve-wracking. Earl Grey was a fine man, very pleasant and easy to talk to. But I was so relieved when it was all behind me and I could return to my normal life." Despite her disclaimer, As I worked on the foreground of my picture, I tried to imagine what it would feel like to be that famous and rub shoulders with the celebrities of the day. After some moments' reflection, she laughed aloud. The whole party of people included in the honor was invited to Dr. Maffeil's home for afternoon tea and a late dinner. Between meals, the Governor-General invited me to stroll with him on the grounds. We came to a pretty little, freshly painted white building with new curtains. I knew it was a water closet that had been done up for the occasion, but His Excellency mustn't have known about such things. Why do you say that? Because he invited me to sit with him on the steps and have a chat. Really? Oh, yes. I could hardly tell him what it was, so I was forced to sit beside him while we talked for half an hour about literature. It was a wonderful conversation, except that I was trying not to laugh every time I saw groups of ladies coming through the woods in search of the WC, and then retreating when they saw us. I can only hope their need wasn't too urgent. I laughed in delight. You could have written some version of that in one of your books, I said. It's as funny as the story of Anne accidentally getting her friend Diana drunk on currant wine. Oh, indeed, I couldn't have. The subject matter would have been too shocking in my day. Such things as water closets were never mentioned. My readers would have thought it indecent. Too bad. The best stories are the ones that never get told. That evening, I came across a description she wrote of a visitor to her grandmother's house when Maud was a child. This is in Maud's journal. He was a thin, anemic individual with a straggling, pointed beard and pale, indeterminate eyes. He said to me as I stood in the corner by the stove, watching him curiously in his thin, squeaky voice, "Little girl, isn't it nice to be a Christian?" I looked at him, at his shivering form, his pinched blue face, his claw-like hands spread over the stove, and I thought that he was a Christian and that I certainly didn't want to be one. Reading that, I snickered and then felt pricked with an idea. I retrieved my sketchbook and pencil from my neglected studio and took them to the bedroom. Propping myself up on pillows, I began working, feeling the first spark of pleasure in months. I made several initial starts, then found my stride and worked quickly for an hour. Adam came in and smiled. "Good to see you working again," he said. "Can I see?" I handed him the sketchbook on which I had drawn an anthropomorphic sketch of Garth as a ferret. His lean, elongated body and pointed nose and a narrow face had suggested the idea to me. I had printed below it, "Ferreting out heresy." I thought Adam might laugh, or at least smile, but he stared at me for a long moment. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked at me. "Nicole, I'm concerned about you." I pressed my lips together, trying not to giggle like a naughty schoolgirl. "How so?" I asked, and couldn't suppress my snorts any longer. "You've been behaving oddly for some time." His eyes searched mine as though looking for some sense of reason. I met his gaze coldly, not responding. "Nicole, if you don't want to talk to me about it, maybe you could talk to someone else." I looked at him. "Like who?" He cleared his throat. "Counselor?" He shoved his hands in his pockets and took them out again, one of his habits when he was nervous. I considered his words. Was it really that bad? Seriously? Seriously. For the first time, I noticed the pain in his expression. Did he think I was crazy or merely malfunctioning? A car that had developed a problem with its transmission. Was he hoping that a counselor would return me repaired, good for another 100,000 miles? Instead of the anger and resistance Adam was probably expecting, I felt intrigued. A door opening. Someone I could talk to freely. Someone living. You have one in mind? He tried not to make his relief obvious. There's someone in Thunder Bay I've heard good things about. So you've done your research. He shrugged. Yeah. Okay. He blinked. Okay, as in, I'll see him. 2 weeks later, I walked into the counselor's office for the first time. Trevor, the mechanic of misbehaving wives, greeted me with a smile and a handshake and invited me to sit, indicating a cozy blue armchair. He sat opposite in a high-backed leather armchair. He looked to be in his 50s, of average height and build. He wore black jeans, brogues, and a neatly pressed shirt. His hair was graying but thick. I noticed an expensive-looking watch on his wrist. A coffee table sat between us with a small clock and a box of tissues. The clock faced him. I made a note to wear a watch next time, not because I cared about the time. I just thought I should have at least as much information as my therapist. My eye was drawn to what appeared to be a coffee stain on the carpet, not quite concealed by his armchair. There was no coffee on the coffee table. I wondered if it was there to create the friendly ambiance of a living room or to put a fence between us, to keep us in our corners. On this side, professionals, and on the other, crazies. The large teddy bear in the corner was a nice touch. There were the expected frame degrees proclaiming Trevor's qualifications to root around in people's heads, and a bookshelf of psychology texts, on top of which perched a chia swan. I wondered how I was to take seriously advice from a man who kept a chia pet. Nevertheless, I played the role assigned me. Dressed in an attractively tailored outfit, appropriate for a minister's wife, I spoke softly with downcast eyes, nervously turning my wedding band around on my finger. So, what's going on, Nicole? He said. It was my husband's idea, I said, having rehearsed on the way to Thunder Bay. He thinks I've been acting strangely. Have you? My mouth twitched. I guess so. I've been withdrawing from things and avoiding people. Do you know why you don't want to see people? I studied my hands. There was ice in my voice as I spoke. I can't be bothered with people anymore. It's too much effort, and I don't see the point. He considered this. You don't enjoy the people in your life. You could say that. Solitude doesn't bore me, but gossipy old ladies do, I said, quoting Maud. So, you prefer to be alone, he said. Is that a problem? Not for me, but it is for my husband. In his line of work as a minister, it's awkward having a wife who doesn't fit in. I told him about Adam's concern about my depression, about my loneliness for Calvin and Desiree, about my frustrations at the church. I wasn't sure I should mention Maud to him. He seemed genuinely sympathetic. What are you hoping I can do for you? He said. I thought that over, but was at a loss for an answer. I'm not sure what can be done, I said at last, with a slight shrug. He let the silence build until it became awkward. When it became apparent that I wasn't about to blink first, he said, You may need to take some time to figure that out. I'd like to talk to you some more and explore some things. But first, I'd recommend that you give yourself some time to be with your feelings. The issues you mentioned are real, but I suspect there is more going on beneath the surface. By the time I left his office, I was feeling more cheerful. It had felt good to give voice to some of the dialogue in my head without fear of repercussions. We had agreed on another appointment, and Trevor encouraged me to be with my feelings advice I would find easier to follow if I knew what they were. When I came out, Maud was sitting in the passenger seat of my car, dressed in a navy dress with a jaunty hat and pearls, her purse tucked neatly at her feet. I sighed, then got in. "So, tell me, what was it like?" she asked as soon as I put the car in gear. "What was what like?" "You know perfectly well. There's no need to be coy. What was it like to see a therapist? What did he do?" I was tired of talking after my session with Trevor and unsure whether I wanted to get into it with her. Mostly I talked and he listened and asked questions. Was that helpful? I don't know. Maybe. Yes, I suppose it felt good to be heard. Although I got the impression he's a bit full of himself. She laughed. "Are you surprised?" "Maybe I shouldn't be." "I've made a study of these matters," she said. "I've read many books on psychology, including Freud. My interest hasn't been purely academic either. I suffered from neurasthenia myself during those hideous years of financial reverses and court cases, Ewan's illness, and problems with the Norval Church. And on top of that, my constant worries of my son's education and future. My son Chester seemed determined to waste his life and bring shame and humiliation on us. It gave me no end of sleepless nights and anxiety." She stared out the passenger window at the lines of houses. No one had any idea of what I went through. At a time when my life was unendurable and I thought that death would be welcome. I received a fan letter that said, "You must be very happy because your books have done so much good in the world." Oh God, that's what everybody believed. Every day I woke wondering what fresh agony the day would bring. And all the time I continued to run meetings and appear cheerful while I was managing how life could go on. How did you manage to do that? I wonder at that myself. Somehow one carries on in spite of everything. The discipline my grandmother had instilled in me allowed me to put on a good face for the public. No matter how I felt, I was always able to seem outwardly happy and calm. No one ever guessed otherwise. She smiled ironically. I have always been a good performer, like my Emily and my Story Girl. All those talks I gave to the Women's Press Club, the Women's Canadian Club, the Business and Professional Women's Club, the English-speaking union, church groups, the newspapers wrote glowing accounts of my skills as a speaker. And the Old Time Club performances I organized, where I was in costume and became historical figures, how I enjoyed it all. I suppose that my public face was just another performance, one that was as convincing as any I ever did on a stage. But after the performance, that was another story. The tears, the exhaustion, the sleepless nights when only Veronal would help. And sometimes even the Veronal wasn't enough. And no close friends, no one in whom I could confide. This line of conversation wasn't helping my state of mind. You carried on, though, I said, hoping to segue into another topic. What choice did I have? What can't be cured must be endured, as the saying goes, until the time came when I could endure no more. I had reached the outskirts of town and turned onto the Trans-Canada. I was beginning to feel agitated. Fortunately, she became more cheerful. But medical science has made such strides in this century. I suppose you have more advanced treatments today than what we had. Bromides, and doctors who patted us on the shoulder and told us all would be well. In my rearview mirror, I could see a transport gaining ground on me. I waited for it to pass before responding. I sure hope so, I said. Over the next while, I met with Trevor every other week. Of course, we got into my father's abandonment and my mother's refusal to discuss his departure with me. I was surprised at how hard it was to talk about that part of my history, to speak the words out loud. At the same time, I was enjoying his focused attention and empathy. I usually went by myself, preferring the time alone in the car to think. Adam didn't object. He had work to do. Besides, spending hours in the car with my intense silences wasn't much fun. Trevor said that the sadness would always be there. I would just handle it differently. I wondered what I was having these expensive conversations for then, sitting in his blue room, staring at the dirty spot on the carpet, trying to ignore the fact that he could see my hands twisting and twisting around a pen, even though I kept the rest of myself immobile. Still, I was willing to pay just to have someone listen. My silences at home became more frequent and more intense after each session. Trevor was always encouraging me to get acquainted with my emotions. That inevitably resulted in me waking up in the middle of the night, wrestling like Jacob with some shadowy thing or presence. It felt like being in labor, with short rests between contractions before the wrestling began again. But what was I giving birth to? One night after a session, I had a nightmare about Dad leaving us, stopping to look back sorrowfully and shake his head before disappearing. I knew it was my fault. He was disappointed in me. I reached out my arms to him, crying, and woke with tears on my cheeks. Another time I dreamed about being in a house where every room had a picture of a prison hanging on the wall. I woke in panic, hyperventilating and trying to slow my racing heart. I began sleeping on the couch in my studio frequently, not wanting to wake Adam or to have to explain my restlessness. Adam was beginning to wonder if seeing Trevor had been a good idea after all. "You seem more depressed than ever," he said, over a lunch of tuna sandwiches. "Trevor says it'll get worse before it gets better." Adam didn't look encouraged. Maud frequently showed up on my drives home after sessions. She was curious to learn about Trevor's methods and surprised to know that they consisted mainly of talking and listening. I told her that it was a healing luxury to be heard without censoring myself or worrying about consequences, even when, or especially when, the conversations led to some dark places. "I used to have that with my dear cousin Freddie," Maud commented. "Perhaps if she had not died when she did, I would not have suffered so desperately. With her, I could rinse out my soul. No topic was forbidden, and we could laugh until anyone listening would have thought we were crazy. How that lightened our burdens. She died tragically young, leaving me bereft. What hurt me so keenly with her death was the fact that there was no one left on earth to understand. I had only one friend before whom I could think aloud, and she was taken from me." Her hands trembled as she reached into her purse and retrieved an embroidered handkerchief that she used to dab at her eyes. My own emotions were close to the surface, and seeing her grief, I teared up. Eventually, she composed herself as she looked out the window as the tree-covered rock cuts zooming by, like an endlessly unraveling spool of gray and green fabric. Occasionally, they opened to reveal a dazzling flash of Lake Superior before closing up again. "This part of the country is not without beauty," she commented. "Not the same kind as in Norval or my beloved island. They had a gentle, welcoming kind of sweetness, with their dear orchards and ponds and pretty farmhouses. This is a more majestic, forbidding kind of loveliness, like an ice queen, dazzling, but cold and severe." "It's lonely country," I said. That's the end of chapter 15.
Thank you very much. That's very moving.
Thank you.
So we will move on to our second reader, Thomas Wayne King. Tom writes books, tales, essays, rhymes, raps, and music of the Lake Superior Northlands, as well as across several science and engineering fields. He and author wife Deborah Ray King live in their old growth forest homestead in Solon Springs, Wisconsin, and raise registered Icelandic sheep at their wild Sunny Cove farm overlooking bays and harbors of Lake Superior. They run, hike, ski, skate, and savor every season. Tom and Debbie have 2 grown sons and 2 grandchildren. Tom is Professor Emeritus of Communications, Science, and Disorders at UW EU Clare, Wisconsin. Both are karate black belts and FCC licensed ham radio operators. So Tom, take it away.
Well, thank you, Tessa, and thank you, everyone. What a pleasure to be with you tonight. Yes, I write academic stuff, and I'm going to give you just a little bit of that at the end of this presentation. But I have 4 pieces for you tonight that are Northland tales, all dealing with the Lake Superior Northland, and we're just south of Duluth Superior, just on the south range, looking out at the bays of Lake Superior from the south side. This first one is called Ice Lemon, and it appears in my first Tales from the Red Pump book, volume 1. I'll say more about that a bit later, but here you go. We'll just dive right into it. All of these, incidentally, are, I guess you'd say, nonfiction, or one possibly is a little creative nonfiction, but this is definitely a true story. Ice Lemon. Upper Lake St. Croix was a frozen mirror on December 9th, 2006. It was already 3 p.m. that sunny, cold day, and I knew the light would fade soon. At this latitude in December, we have usable sunlight for lake skating only until about 5 p.m., depending on cloud cover. I finished my work for the day and decided a long-distance skate on our 7-mile lake would be perfect. The lake ice had frozen and firmed up a week before, and I checked it for safety earlier that day. No snow had fallen in that late autumn, so the lake surface was a brilliant sheet of wide open, clean ice. An old hockey player's private paradise, something rarely seen now in years of warmer winters. From our garage hockey equipment box, I grabbed my Bauer skates, hockey gloves, and one of my old banged up ragged taped sticks. Hadn't used them in a year or more, and it felt good to be heading out for a well-lit skate on a glassy lake. With the total lack of snow in our area, the walk down to the lake bank was quick. There, I sat on a big rock at the edge, tied on my skates, and put on my gloves. I grabbed my stick, pushed off with my lifelong skater's legs, and power glided out on my smooth, personally reserved rink. There was no one else around. It felt sublime to stride strongly and skim over the slick, bright surface in the sun. I skated north about 2 miles in just a few minutes before the ice got rougher. Then I turned around and headed back south to explore around the island at the other end of the lake. In my rush to get out on the ice during sunlight, I forgot to bring a puck along to stick handle and pass as I skated up and down the lake. Our puck bag of many black hard rubber discs and a few red plastic street hockey balls was underneath other gear in our box, and I forgot to grab it when I left. Not a problem for us old-time outdoor hockey guys. I just skated up to any loose chunk of ice, small stick, or pine cone I saw on the ice, scooped it in with my curved stick, and passed it on ahead to my imaginary teammates as I skated hard. What fun! And what pure joy to move nearly silently, effortlessly on a fast, friction-free surface. Best skate ever, I thought, even though I was alone on the lake. I skated along briskly, enjoying the wind from my speed, the endless blue sky, and the open panorama of the lake and surrounding forests. I was lost in my own exceptional early winter world. Hey, up ahead, a dot on the ice. I skated up closer and could see it was a faded yellow round thing. A tennis ball? Or had someone lost their street hockey ball or their driveway puck out there earlier? Curious, I charged up closer, never guessing from a distance what it really was. A whole lemon, frozen solid. How random, a loose lemon lying on the ice, hard as a rock and faded from the bright grocery store yellow we're used to. The story behind that was anyone's guess. Maybe it fell out of an ice fisherman's cooler. Maybe animals got it out of the garbage near a lakeshore cabin. Who knows? Whatever its method of arrival on the lake, the lemon was exactly the missing puck I needed. I skated fast now in rapid bursts and slapped it on ahead on the smooth ice, then raced to catch up to it. I stick-handled it forward and backward in tight turns and long loops. I tried crazy behind the back and between the skates passes. They all worked. I was so loose and relaxed. My team of one was looking good. If only I'd had a partner to pass to or been in a game that day, boy, could I have shown them my old stuff. I didn't even have to worry about hitting ruts or holes during all my gyrations because the surface was so clean and clear, almost like newly re-iced indoor skating. In a while, I was tired from all my tight turns, stops, and reversals of directions with my new lemon puck. It was my first skate of the winter, so to slow it down a bit, I skated directly north around the east side of Crownheart Island, then turned south at the island's northernmost tip to skate along the sunny west shoreline in the windbreak of the tall pines on the island. I cruised in a silent, pure world now, sending my ice lemon way out ahead of me, then chasing it and shooting it out again, over and over. My attention had been fully occupied for the last hour, up and down the lake, back and forth. Now, suddenly, a moving shape came into peripheral view over my left shoulder. Something moving casually, about shoulder height, maybe just 10 feet now to my left. It was a large bald eagle coming slowly to my level in full spread glide pattern with wings at least 7 feet across, tip to tip. He, maybe she, floated in silently about 5 feet off the ice, focused on the lemon out ahead of us about 30 feet. The eagle held his glide pattern over the lemon, dropping to about 3 feet above the ice, then tipped his head down to look more closely at the yellow treasure as he passed above. He gritted through a tight left banking power turn, not unlike what I had been doing on the ice surface. Then he rose in the air, flew back around me again from north to south over the ice at about waist height, trying to get a closer look at this mysterious object. I stopped and watched in amazement. My silent lake partner repeated his close airborne inspections of the random thing on the ice at least 3 more times, trying to figure out what that wobbling, flopping, skidding yellow object was. Food, fish, usual prey? I can only wonder. Then he flew off, disappearing into the endless blue over the distant forest. For a few moments, the eagle and I were in a sunlit, clear world of curiosity that day on the ice. We shared our joy of moving freely and effortlessly, him reveling in gliding, swooping, and turning in the air, me enjoying much the same on my glassy 2-dimensional medium of polished, once-in-a-lifetime lake ice. We both pursued an odd target that afternoon and had some fun together. I will never forget us both, eagle and skater, chasing that random lemon during our shared St. Croix ice mirror adventure. What an experience. What a story. I couldn't make it up if I tried. And by the way, our ice lemon is still in a plastic bag in our barn freezer here at home near the Red Pump in Solon Springs. It will stay there as a reminder of that cold afternoon of crystalline perfection, frozen fondly in my memory forever. That's the first piece. The next is called Magic Snow Socks, and it's from one of my, this is book 3 in the series, Magic Snow Socks. And this gives you a little bit of my Canadian heritage. Someone is on. Could you please mute? There's noise coming in. Whoever, just mute if you would, folks. That helps. Magic Snow Socks involves my grandfather, Gideon Waugh, who came from eastern Quebec to the Hayward, Wisconsin area for the timber industry. He was a lumberjack and back in the 1870s. And he was the son of Antoine Waugh, and one of 5 Native women in eastern Quebec that Antoine had 22 children with. So I don't know who my great grandmother is. She's an indigenous woman from somewhere in eastern Canada. I might be related to the Governor General. Who knows? She's from out that way. But Gideon came to Antoine's son came to Wisconsin, and that's who I'm going to be speaking about here. This again is a somewhat fictionalized but a very true story. It's called Magic Snow Socks. Abigail darted through the packed, narrow lanes of new January snow. Duck, duck, goose was the game. Her kids called her Sister Abigail, and they couldn't catch her. The good sister's secret was her knee-high woolen socks. She wore them on the outside over her other stockings. No boots, no shoes. Sister Abigail's thick hand-knit socks gripped the dry snow, giving her tremendous, seemingly divine, traction advantage over her young pupils. They loved it, and her, following their agile teacher in games of tag, cut the pie, pom-pom pull away, red rover come over, and foot races around the schoolyard. Sister Abigail, perhaps a decade older than her students, always won. Laughter and squeals of excitement set aglow this hardscrabble valley of northwestern Wisconsin in early 1917. A timid, dark-haired boy, almost 9 years old and always alone, walked past the lively group each day to and from his own rural, one-room public school just a bit down the road. Victor, in 4th grade, shared his school with kids of many ages and with their teacher, Mr. Cott. During his school hike each day, Victor noticed the activity at Sister Abigail's parochial playground. Her winter exuberance with the children was palpable, contagious. Several months earlier, Victor and his mother, along with a few relatives, watched as Vic's dad's casket was lowered into a cold, gaping grave. Soon after, Victor's older brother, his only brother, left for the new war. Play and laughter had become rare in Victor's life. On a sunny late January afternoon, Victor finally stopped on his way home to watch Sister Abigail's excited group. A dozen or so boys and girls about his age tried to break the chain of gripped hands in their enthusiastic playground game of Tom. Some of the kids looked familiar. Soon, the friendly athletic sister ran over to him. "Would you like to play?" With her warm smile, she offered Victor a place in their game. New snow was fun. Self-conscious and timid Victor looked down at the snow, his roughshod feet. He was poor. No, I can't today. Victor still had on his barn boots. His only other footwear were the old lace-up leather-soled shoes from his recently deceased father. Those were sad and comical, way too large, too slippery, too worn to walk in, let alone to play in with new kids. Embarrassed, Victor explained that he was wearing ragged, dirty socks from his morning barn work, keeping them on because he rushed to get to school on time. Excuse me. His socks had big holes needing darning, and he didn't want the kids to see. Sister Abigail said she understood and that he was welcome to stop by any time. The sparkle in her eyes beckoned to Victor, along with the inviting gleam of bright snow. They bespoke a promise of fun and inclusion sometime. He walked home, thinking. Several days later, as Victor did early morning farm chores, the new powder snow was over his boots. His rural school seldom closed in winter except during true blizzards because the 20-some kids enrolled all lived on nearby farms. As durable farm-strong children, they either hiked to school, rode on their families' horse-drawn sleighs and wagons, or slid quietly over the fields with their farmyard skis. Each winter school day was precious because family farm work often intruded on the kids' attendance during spring and fall months when their help at home was essential. Today, Victor would rely on his simple handmade skis. They had large leather toe straps allowing him to wear his barn boots and to move easily among farm outbuildings in deep snow. He slipped the toes of his boots into the straps and off he went for chores. And that was how he would go to school, skiing across the fields over much shorter routes than he could walk on the roads. Victor knew his schoolhouse would be warm and welcoming with a roaring fire that Miss Picot built in the barrel stove. She and the older boys made certain their school was always cozy and safe for the smaller children. Victor was excited. His mother packed his lunch of 2 thick slices of homemade bread spread with lard, a small glass bottle she filled with milk from their one remaining cow, and a compact jar of maple syrup from their home sugar bush for dipping his bread. When his school let out early that afternoon, Victor skied toward home, staying on snow-covered field trails that led past Sister Abigail's group. They were already out in the snow, playing and shouting. Even from a field away, Victor could hear the loud game of tag as the children and sister sprinted and turned, twisted and dodged past each other to avoid becoming it. Laughter filled that valley. As Victor skied up to the parochial schoolyard, he saw Sister Abigail running toward him in her black and white habit, with her distinctive wool outer socks dripping the sparkling snow. She was agile, quick, and sure-footed, and holding something in her hand. His heart soared. "Hello, Victor. Would you like to play with us?" She knew his name. Victor nodded. "Yes, I would, thank you." "Very well. Just place your skis and boots over there by the tree. Pull up your socks as tight as you can and tuck your pants in them. Then pull these big socks over the top of everything." Sister Abigail handed him a new pair of bulky gray socks she had knitted. Constructed from coarse leftover rug yarn, they were rough, warm, and just what Victor needed to join the fun. "They're yours, Victor," she spoke so just he could hear. Victor put on the socks and tried them out, marveling at how he could leap, run, stop, and turn so fast. These were the best things he had ever worn on his feet. He joined with the kids and Abigail as they lined up on two sides of the playground for Red Rover. Their second call was, Red Rover, let Victor come over." Victor darted and dodged to the other side, in free. The bulky snow socks worked again and again. Magic. So nimble, such grip. Victor enjoyed new warmth of acceptance, skill, and admiration. For an hour that day, and on days to come, Victor found haven from sadness and poverty, an affirming refuge he could share, so different from what he had known over the past year. His father's death, his only brother's departure for the new war, his farm responsibilities, now Victor's and his mother's alone, all faded in the glistening snow-globe world Sister Abigail and her students created for him. Victor stopped by often to play during that exceptional winter of magic snow socks. Next piece, thank you very much. Coming up this weekend in the Duluth area here. This is from Red Pump Chronicles, where I assembled all of the volumes together and done some annotations and such. Coming up this weekend is the John Verdery sled dog race, and we always have folks from Thunder Bay and from Quebec and around, even someone from Chile last year. Imagine that. This is about sled dogs, and it'll explain itself. It's called On By. We can learn a lot from sled dogs. In our case, our totally unofficial, uncertified, unregistered, and unruly Red Pump dogs from here in Solon Springs, Scotty and Sonia, are eager, trained, Sheltie Border Collie mixed power pullers. Sort of, maybe. They may not be professional sled dogs, but they do focus on the essentials that sled dogs do. They know G, go right, paw, turn left, hike, charge ahead fast, whoa, stop, and on by, ignore irrelevant distractions. Most of us who are pulling hard in our lives and jobs, regardless of our own pedigrees or lack thereof, are pretty good at the first four of those. Our language has many social metaphors for these concepts going well beyond the physical actions described. But that last one, on by, is still something we all can learn. Getting our work done without being diverted is often difficult. Tuning out distractions and disruptions in our lives day and night is hard to do and seems to get harder the older we become. Acting upon on by, meaning not worrying, not fixating needlessly on concerns about family, work, politics, money, and so on, gets harder to do as we add to the worry weight on our own individual sleds of life. Pulling that heavy load takes its toll on us. Curiously, the growing popularity of expensive designer stimulant beverages and other pick-me-ups we use seems paralleled by growing attention to the array of relentlessly advertised sleep aids. Our custom as a society appears increasingly to be animate ourselves with some products during the day, try to calm ourselves and quiet our active minds, as the ads say, with other heavily advertised products at night. That good night's sleep for us still seems ever evasive. The use of uppers during the day and downers at night, unfortunately, has been around a long time. Now our ups and downs seem more and more mediated by mass-marketed products and brand names, be they caffeine sources or prescription sleep medications. Seems we're going both ways at once. Maybe the sled dogs and their drivers have it right. We all need a firm reminder sometimes to just let certain things go on by. When we have done what we can about our concerns at home or work or with our health or family or finances, we should keep our focus and keep moving ahead just like the sled dogs do. We can continue on by and not let those worries, distractions, and disappointments lure us off our trail. Yes, sled dogs can teach us a lot about doing the best we can in the moment with what we have and letting the rest of life work out as we run our course. On by may be particularly useful to remember at this point in our lives. Not hike it up, press on, pull harder, not whoa, stop trying or caring, but on by. Give ourselves permission to keep on going while we let distractions and memories of imperfections remain in the background of our lives. Sometimes it's good just to comb and pet your dogs as you sit on the deck near our red pump and let the world work itself out around you. These sled dogs are mighty smart. One more very short one. One of the textbooks that I re-upped, some that I had done with Simon and Schuster, Allen and Bacon in Boston a few years ago, I redid it. I bought the rights back and redid the human factors one. So this deals with how humans interact with technology, but I just thought you'd enjoy this. It's 100 words about zombie fingers, and this relates directly to winter. You may have experienced this. 100 words about zombie fingers from page 142. Some users of capacitive touchscreens on our phones, tablets, and other devices experience zombie fingers. They press on desired activation sites of their visual display but cannot make the device respond. Although often thought to be related to skin temperature of the user's fingers, especially for older or exceptionally thin people, the phenomenon is due more to moisture sensed by the electronic field emerging from the touchscreen. Gloved or calloused fingers can be zombifying and yield the same results. Keeping skin moisturized or using a stylus can help. Some users report employing a snack sausage. Really. That's it. Thanks, folks. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Tom. A sausage. Now there's a thought.
Yeah. In South Korea, apparently that's quite a, you carry a hot dog in your pocket.
For those moments when your fingers just won't do it.
For us, it's a life-threatening thing because when we're working at our farm, which is away from our house here, it's a bit of ways. And when Debbie's up there, she's very thin and she cannot dial her phone many times. She simply can't. So if there's an emergency or some problem, or just to communicate, the phone simply won't accept her touches. So she absolutely has zombie fingers. She's not a zombie, but that's how we got into this. So thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Tonight's third reader, Mary E. Gastmeier. After more than 20 years of studying and working in numerous countries, Mary returned to Thunder Bay with her 2 young daughters. She attended Lakehead University and attained her MA in English literature with a specialization in women's studies, as well as her B.Ed. Recently retired as a vice principal. She is just now returning to putting pen to paper. Mary finds this endeavor both daunting and enticing, and one she is thrilled to pursue. Mary?
Thank you so much, Tessa. I'm going to read the second chapter from my memoir that is a work in progress. And the chapter is called Daddy's Girl. It's almost time to see him. My slender frame vibrates with anticipation and excitement. I drag my eyes away from the snowy picture on the tiny television screen to notice the wood stacked in the corner. I am meant to replenish the pot-bellied stove to keep the small living room warm and toasty. Slowly, my hand reaches out to grab a roughly chopped log, and I casually toss it onto the dying embers. The latch on the stove is slammed shut rather than turned firmly into place. He's here. My eyes are glued to the small screen. I see the reindeer first, and then the sleigh, and then I smell a terrible stench of burning flesh. Looking down, I see the open door of the stove and burning hunks of wood eating away at my right leg. A loud pitched, almost primal scream breaks from my small body, and I'm scooped up and thrown into the kitchen sink. Cold water erupts from the faucet, which causes both pain and relief. A phone call is made. My father is called. He will come. With guilt stamped on her face, my foster mother fusses with ointments and bandages. She is a stern matriarch of the household and not one to show emotions. But today her movements are deft, but gentle. I revel in the patient role until a few weeks later when the pain becomes unbearable and I show my foster mother the red lines running from my burn site down to my foot. As he always does, my father comes to my rescue. It is the middle of the night, but there is an open clinic only 3 hours away. I have the big toe on my right foot sliced open and the poison from the infection drained. I scream through the entire procedure, which drives my father outside to lean against the truck. His head sinks into his chest, and his clenched fists hang helplessly by his side. Once the initial shock wears off and the pain subsides, I get excellent mileage out of this incident. My foster mother lets me get away with behavior she normally will not tolerate. My 8-year-old self knows I am taking advantage of the situation. My father spoils me, which means I'm allowed to spend more time with him. In fact, I've become his shadow. It is a glorious sensation. Despite the absence of my home, my mother, and my 3 siblings, it is the best year of my young life. As the oldest of 4 young children in a close-knit family, I do not understand the sudden splintering of my world. However, ours is not your typical 1950s family. When they meet, my father is a 34-year-old veteran of World War II's tank division in North Africa. My mother is a naive and innocent 18-year-old high school graduate who moves from her family's home in Fort Frances to teach at the one small school in Hudson. Fate intervenes and arrangements are made for the young girl to board at the house of my eventual father and grandmother. The attraction is immediate, and despite protestations from his mother, the unconventional couple have a whirlwind courtship and marry within a year. 10 years and 4 children later, fate intervenes again when the province of Ontario determines my mother must attend a 1-year certificate course in order to continue teaching. The closest university is in Port Arthur, a city 4 hours southeast of Hudson on the tip of Lake Superior. My father works night and day at the hotel, so my mother takes my 2 preschool-age brothers with her, and my sister and I are fostered with local families for the duration of her studies. The plan is that we will be reunited on the weekends. I have no recollection of reunions. There are few tears at the original separation. Shock will do that, but there is a physical ache left by my father's absence. However, I soon realized that all I have to do is run away from my foster home, and I do, on a regular basis. My foster mother sends me off at the door every morning with my lunch in one hand and school satchel in the other. As soon as she disappears, I do too. I run to the hotel. My father, more times than not, doesn't have the heart to take me to school. This is perhaps not the best trait for the chairman of the school board, but on the odd occasion when he does take me back, I simply do a U-turn and return to the hotel. While my leg heals, I do as I please. The adults in my life are governed by guilt, and I reap the benefits. As well, time with my father makes all the pain and discomfort worthwhile. I spend wonderful afternoons helping at the hotel. I sit on boxes in the dim light under the bar, passing up bags of chips and peanuts when requested. I venture into the tavern and empty overflowing ashtrays into a small metal bucket. I learn how to make the pickled eggs that float in vinegar in huge jars that sit in the center of the bar. I learn how to iron sheets on the hotel-sized ironing press with its large sausage-like rollers. I take my responsibility seriously. I learn that no matter how busy he may be, he always has time to pull me on his lap. His manner is gentle and his sense of humor close to the surface. Even now, I see his outstretched arms and gleam in his eyes that says, well, come on then. In the mind of a young child and in the recollections of an older woman, he is a mountain of a man. His Germanic look is due to his broad shoulders and stocky build. As well, his blonde hair is in a short brush cut and his dark blue eyes twinkle mischievously. To hug him is to smell cigars and beer. These become the smell of home. Perhaps not the most wholesome scent to conjure such a domestic image, but I was not then, nor am I now, either practical or traditional. My world with my father at the center is small yet complete. He is a big man in a small town. He always wears work clothes because he's always working. As well as owning the only hotel and pub in town, he owns and maintains the town's water line, and he also owns the school bus, which takes the high school students to the next town. There seems to be nothing he can't do or fix or solve or create. We live in a little white box of a house that is perched atop the hill that overlooks the road out of town. 6 of us in a tiny 2-bedroom home. Yet there seems plenty of room to run and play. In my safe and secure world, I can stand in my backyard and see our lake, Lac Seul, all around me. Turning around, I see rooftops peeking out of the bush. In front of the lake is my home away from home, Dad's hotel. Next door is Auntie B, who is not related to me in the traditional sense, but in a small town, every adult is either an auntie or an uncle. Next to her is Auntie Marge, my father's sister, with her husband and my 4 cousins. Below me is my grandmother, my father's mother. She now lives in a mobile home, but the only moving it does is shift farther into the ground after each winter snow and spring thaw. Before the family splintering, mine is a secure and predictable world. As well, the patterns of life in a small bush town in an isolated region are also predictable. The fall signals the hunting season, as every family relies on deer and moose meat for the long winter. My father crafts his own houseboat, and I have a large color photograph of him on the boat, dressed head to toe in hunting gear, with a cigar clenched firmly in his mouth and a rifle resting securely on his right thigh. Ironically, according to my mother, he is too gentle to be a hunter at heart. Perhaps the years fighting in the war soured his enthusiasm for using a gun. Nonetheless, living in the North requires adapting. Survival requires such. Life in winter is dreary, and my father is always on call as water pipes freeze and burst, always in the middle of the night, it seems. Some rejoice at the return of the ice and snow for the opportunity to skate, play hockey, skidoo, and ice fish. Lac Seul freezes over, and the bone-chilling temperatures keeps everyone else sheltered and hibernating. The first thaw announces the arrival of spring and the rebirth of fields and wildflowers and blueberry bushes, the awakening and emergence of bears, and the slow appearance of the blue-green lake. But spring also sees the influx of trappers who come to see Dad to sell their beaver hides. I help him stretch out the skins and measure them. Even now I can smell the musky odor of both trapper and fur. We lay out the skins in the foyer just inside the back door of the hotel. Here the blue and white square tiles help me know where to line up the skin, and then I dutifully hold the tape while Dad measures to the end of the tail. The trappers are shy with me, which makes Dad chuckle, as he knows they will shortly come alive once they push open the tavern doors. I love spending this time with Dad, as I don't have to share him with siblings. As well, there is excitement in the air as summer is quickly approaching. Summer is freedom. Once school finishes at the end of June, life shifts gears as the back of the pickup truck is loaded with kids and provisions, and we move to our camp, called the Big Mosquito, on Vermilion Lake. We can barely contain our excitement as the truck bumps and swerves its way to the lake. We know every inch and turn of the dusty pothole dirt road. Every crooked tree, beaver dam, and blueberry patch signals our distance from house to camp. As each signpost is passed, the excitement reaches fever pitch. At camp, we are wild and free. Camp is swimming, bloodsuckers, fish fries, and playing with cousins. It is the smell of always damp hair and the gritty taste of sand in everything we eat. Our camp is like no other. My father waited for Vermilion to freeze, then brought over an airplane hangar and slowly converted it into a camp. But the piece de resistance is a Victorian solid oak bar that runs the full width of the building. It is complete with high round pillars and bar-to-ceiling beveled glass mirrors. Reflected in the mirrors is a colorful array of bottles of alcohol. My favorite is a 4-foot-tall bottle of yellow liqueur with a dancing ballerina twirling in the center. Behind the bar is a sink and numerous kegs of beer. It is a wondrous playground. It comes as no surprise that working behind a bar is comfortable. It feels like home. In Australia, my job as a bartender pays my way through college. Years later, working as a server in a bar pays for my travels around the country. Later still, working at the Blacksmith Arm, a bar in Hong Kong, funds my meandering throughout Southeast Asia. Life at the hotel and summers at camp prepare me well for my adult years. Both are magical places for me, but memories of camp live in the realm of the enchanted. It has a player piano in the corner, which provides the accompaniment to many a dance marathon and singing competition. Trophies such as an albino beaver skin and a rather out-of-place swordfish from Florida adorn the walls. It is lit with propane lanterns, but it does have running water and an indoor flushing toilet. My bedroom has the most unusual decor, as in the center and in pride place is an antique dentist chair. I have short but fun-filled business hours. Between the bar and my dentist practice, I keep very busy. This is my world for the first 9 years of my life. With my father by my side, my world is a fantastical playground. But the year with him to myself comes to an end all too quickly. My mother finishes her studies and returns with my 2 brothers. My sister returns from her foster home, and life returns to what is considered normal. I am forced to actually stay in school and sorely miss working at the bar and having my father to myself. To make this family complete, in my estimation, a pet is needed, specifically a dog. I find a stray and bring her home. Unfortunately, she is in heat, and soon every male dog in town clamors and howls at our kitchen door, demanding access. I well remember that day. It is a cold winter's morning after Mass. I make a fatal mistake. I open the kitchen door, and a pack of dogs race into the house. My father grabs a broom and attempts to clear the barking and growling throng. He raises his arm, broom in hand, and suddenly he falls to the floor and doesn't move. I lean over his motionless body and he opens his eyes. He looks deeply into mine and whispers my name. It is the last word he will utter. Time passes in slow motion. In a blur, the hotel, the camp, and the house are sold. We move from our small town to a larger town, then to a city, then to a new country. Where once my small world fractured temporarily, with the death of my father, my world shattered permanently into 1,000 pieces. Fragments forge into a kaleidoscope of life. Throughout its spins and turns, memories of my father make me smile and bring me comfort. In that time governed by the moon and the stars, he comes to me, and I am once again 9 years old, Daddy's girl. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very traumatic. Wow. So I want to say thank you to our readers this evening. This was great, and I thank you for everybody who turned out to enjoy them. I hope you all enjoyed yourself, enjoyed hearing our stories.